1960.
Yes.
In Halmstad.
Mm-hmm.
You still have that. You still have that dialect?
No, because I moved to Kalmar when I was 3 and moved to Malmö when I was 22. So
I was a bit impressed when I was looking and said that, because I realized that you played in the band Ragnarök.
Yes.
And I was like, wow! Was that? Have you heard about Ragnarök?
Yeah.
Look them up if you haven't. Amazing, like a mixture of different instruments and traditional music in a way, and jazz, and it's exciting.
It was a part of the progressiva musikrörelsen. You can say.
And then I read that you did some composing there, and suddenly you did composing in a thriller, 1988.
Yes.
And that's where it started, with the thriller music.
Right?
Yeah. So I just looked at, these two guys, they have like IMDB. It's like, it doesn't fit on the screen. Scroll. Tyskungen. Jag är min egen Dolly. Svinalängtan. Walk with me. Det är bara liksom en liten bit av Magnus. Han ska få presentera sig själv mer om en minut. Because first I'm just gonna introduce you very shortly. Nathan Larson. So you say Larson. We like to say Larsson. Yeah. So you have Swedish ancestors?
I do. My great-grandfather went to New York in the 1880s.
Yeah.
When it was Larson, they just took that extra S, and they were like, "That's not American sounding." So
And you were born exactly 10 years later, in 1970, Maryland, USA. But where did you live in Maryland, or did you live in New York?
We lived in D.C. and then we moved to New York when I was about 12.
So New York is your turf in a way. Yeah. And I just looked on this long, and I can say Stockholm Requiem, Juliet Naked, Walk in the Woods, Robert Redford, and a lot more. Just mention some. I'm not sure if you're going to mention some of your movies when we're working here, but maybe you are. So now you get to present yourself a bit. Vill du ta på svenska, eller vad känns bäst?
My feeling is that I should speak English, and when the English tar slut så pratar jag svenska.
Det går bra.
Så varsågod Magnus, du får börja berätta lite om hur du hamnade där.
Should I perhaps, it feels natural to explain how I came into this stuff. And I used to say that it was kind of a slump thing, but that's not really true because I was very interested of this phenomenon with putting music on. When I went to the gymnasium, we had some kind of examens thing. We should do something, and in music or other stuff. And me and my friend, we went out and took pictures of people that we think looked cool, and then we made some kind of with this still builds movie. So and then I started to play with Ragnarök, and I composed in Ragnarök, and then I went to Skurup's folkhögskola because I wanted to play jazz. I'm a trumpet player, but after Skurup I got more and more involved in as a theater composer, and I started to compose for theater also. I worked a lot with varietéteatern Barbès, Gotte där borta var med där. Some of our things and a lot of Stadsteatern in Malmö and a lot of free theater groups. Yeah.
I just wonder, how did you get involved in those places? Were you actively asking them, can I join, or were they asking you, and how did they find you, and how did it happen that you got involved?
I can explain how it started anyhow, because it was one of my friends on which I went studied with in Skurup. He had a job at Skånska Teatern, but he couldn't take it. He went in another direction with the band, so he asked me to take his place, and I did that. And then I worked some more with Skånska Teatern, and then I made a small thing like a krogshow or something, and then these guys from Varietéteatern Barbès turned up, and then I started to work with them, and I mean, one thing leads to another thing, and I was at that point, so when I started to work with Varietéteatern Barbès, it was as a composer and also as a musician sometimes, but sometimes I was not involved in as a musician, and I was starting to think about making music for film. It started there, and actually, and so answer your question. I read in the newspaper that they should make a TV series at Malmö TV, and Jan Hemmel was the director, and I called him up, and he had actually heard about me, and he had went to some theater thing I was involved in, and I played some music for him. I mean, this was 1988, so I had no show reel, and I had a cassette band. And actually, when I should put the cassette band in his bergsprängare, he had a kind of strange skrivbordslampa. It had very hard corners, and I was extremely nervous, and I was like, and I got this thing into my, you know, and I didn't think so much about that, but he said, "Excuse me, but you are hurt," and the blood was. So I think it was therefore I got the job. He felt sorry for me.
Was that Magnus? Was that Skånska Mord?
No, it was after Skånska Mord. It was vad heter det nu? Främmande makt. It was the last thing Carl Gustav Lindstedt made. He died after this thing. Yeah.
So can we see that as an introduction of you and move on to...
Yeah.
Can you see me?
So let me see, what can I tell you? I was in bands as well, so I came from that world, more from the punk, hardcore, sort of underground hip-hop angle. In the 80s, I was a teenager. I was really early with being in bands, playing bass, and when I was like 12 and 13 in hardcore bands in New York and in DC, so Washington DC. So that I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I was in a band that got signed to Sony in the 90s, and there was this big stampede after Nirvana, as we all know, and everybody who was in a guitar band and looked the part got signed to a big label, and so I learned about sort of, that was when I was 21 and spent my 20s touring, and then as I came out of it, it was really again it's really sort of being in the right place at the right time and meeting meeting the right people, and it's unfortunately there is some element of chance in that equation. So it so happened that a lot of people had a lot of friends who were going to NYU film school and art school, and a lot of pretty prestigious people graduated from NYU Tisch Film School, Spike Lee, and any number of people. So I had been doing stuff for MTV. They would say we knew people who worked there, and we had a video. There was anyway. They had said we just need something that's like meow or whatever. You know how they have these like and now, and it's like and then you just. They were, and I was like, okay, cool. And then they were like, yeah, we can give you $100, and then we own it. Here, sign this thing, and then it was like this tome, and you'd sign it away all your rights to anything. Which but when you're 22, you get $100 or whatever. It was a good deal. And then that did sort of lead to progressively. I met. There was an editing suite called Post 391, which was in Manhattan. And all of the sort of, there was a wave of filmmakers. Todd Haynes, who made this movie Velvet Goldmine that I worked on and later went on to make a bunch of other fantastic films. Todd Solondz, who makes some sort of weirdo movies, Happiness, and I've worked with him a lot. And Kim Pierce, who was making a movie called Boys Don't Cry. And so I got on that film just because she liked my band. She was like, do you want to do it? I was like, okay, I have a guitar and a microphone and that's sort of it at my house. So it was really nice. And then once you do something like that, and that was a very successful film in the US and worldwide, and it won a bunch of Academy Awards, and so you just literally hang on to the coattails of the people who made it, and then you kind of get dragged into Hollywood and the gates open for you. But then you quickly realize that you don't necessarily want to go through those gates, and they're going to close quickly, and so you make a lot of mistakes along the way there. But that's basically it. And then I'm here. My wife is Swedish. My son is in school here, so I work out of here. I've done some work with Lucas Moodysson and some other Swedish directors, but for the most part, my work comes from the U.S. or from England.
Yeah,
that's me.
Nice.
And thank you for coming.
So this, what we're doing, we call this new concept Mästare möter mästare. We have two very experienced people. We want to do more of this later. So we don't know the format yet for what we've done. But my idea is that we have talked about what we want to talk about. So we have different subjects we're going to go through, and we get like one of them to we both answer, and then you get to ask questions also. So we'll see what kind of like a triangle we can do for every subject. So I want to start somewhere still here in the working and how to work with assignments. And the first question is like, you talked about how you got started, but where do you get your assignments today? Or more like, what happens then? Like, who calls you in, and what do they tell you, and how does that happen? And how do you collaborate with the people? So, any one of you can start.
Yeah, if I understood you, how do you get the jobs, or what happens when you have got the job?
How do you get the assignment, and what do they give you? What do they ask for?
Yeah.
And what happens then?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, because sometimes for me it feels like you are when I really need a job, I search for it a lot and phone people and nothing happens, and then suddenly from a direction that I didn't expect there is something turning up. But when you think a little, perhaps you were sending stuff to them 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, and communicated with them. I like to phone people. That's a bit difficult nowadays, but I think that's a good thing to talk with people. But of course, emails and stuff are very good also. But anyhow, very often det visar sig att man har pratat med dem förut, and I've sent things to them. Så vad vill jag ha sagt med det? Det jag vill ha sagt med det, that is we have to fight all the time and like not fight but work all the time with trying to communicate when it's a good opportunity to communicate, and perhaps not next day but 2 years later or 3 years later or next day something can happen. And I think I don't have a very advanced method or something. I think my method is just to keep on. Yeah.
You want to fill in and get some?
Yeah, I mean, it's all the same stuff that you said. I mean, it's freelance basics and sort of the gig economy, and here we are. You know, we're all sort of going from job to job, and you can go through these dry periods. For me, I generally find I have an agent as well, which is the irony of. It's sort of like when I was a teenager, I wanted to get a job at a bookstore, this really cool bookstore in New York, and they were like, "Have you ever worked at a bookstore?" I was like, "No, that's the whole books I want it." And they were like, "Well, you can't. You have to have experience working in a book." So I was like one of these like. So you can't get an agent unless you've done something that's successful, and then it's very, very ironic. At least in the U.S., it works like that. So I probably get 40% of my work from my agent, and in which case I'm starting to work with strangers, which is actually quite rare. Generally speaking, I get work through people that I already have a relationship with. I'm very lucky to have worked with directors on, 3, 4, 5 movies. So that's been fantastic. And then through them, I meet other people, or the producers who are working on one film will be shifting over to another film. And lately, the way that it works with these premium cable streaming services like HBO and Netflix, they're very. I want to say that they're okay. I shouldn't say that they're lazy, but they sort of shift the entire post-production team from one job to the next job. So it's sort of like you've got Boardwalk Empires going and you're on that, and then they just move you to the next show. So it's like whatever the next big show is, you kind of, because they realize they save money this way. You don't have to get to know each other. They know what they're going to get. So but one of the things that we touched on, I'm going to slightly take a left turn, but is communication with a director or a producer or another creative person. And I think that's absolutely the most crucial thing. I think it's great that you call people on the phone. I think that's, you should never, I think a lot of directors feel that they need to speak musical term, they're like, make it more purple or whatever, and then they feel like that's not enough. But if you know them, and if you get to know what they mean by make it purple, which sounds strange, but if you hang out with them and have a drink with them for 20 minutes, you'll probably be able to figure out what they're talking about. So it's there doesn't need to be like, well, this could go up a half step, and then in fact that's horrible. I think in my experience, when the director knows how to compose, it really becomes a problem. And they're like, wouldn't it be better if you just went to the, and then you're like, no, I don't, then you do it, But so that's, with all due respect to those. But, I think the main thing is never, ever leave a meeting. And this is hard. It's so hard for even, us Americans who blah, 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 blah. But for Swedes, if you're a little more laid back too, it's harder, even harder. Never leave a meeting or get off the phone or hang up without fully understanding what the person is asking of you. That's the big thing, because they'll say, yeah, well, just, it's going to be great. Like, just, so just throw something at us or whatever. And then you're like, okay. And you just want to hang up. And they just want to get off the phone too, because it's stressful for them. But you really have to push through a little bit and get a little bit more information,
You talked about that the editor sometimes is more the
Yes.
person you collaborate with
That's
than
right.
klippare in Swedish.
Yeah.
So how does that work? How do you work with an editor? What happens?
To start with, I have got a lot of works from editors.
Me too.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah.
Because a good editor should be very interested in music, I think, because that's, I mean, they are almost making music than too when they are editing, and they, I mean, they need to have music when they start to work before there is a composer involved, and so my experience is not always, but perhaps a little bit more than the other way, that the editor is more into the musical thing than the director. Not perhaps 50-50 or whatever, but they have a lot of de har mycket att säga till om i min erfarenhet.
And they're also in a position where they're sitting with the editing equipment, and frequently the directors don't necessarily know how to run the Avid or whatever your Final Cut or whatever you're using, and so they come in with a hard drive full of music that they know works for them. Sometimes it can be your music, which is nice, or it's either nice or it's not nice. It's really not nice, because then they're like, can you make it more like your other? So you're trying to copy yourself, but then that's a horrific situation. But they come in with a full complement of sort of music that they know works, and they just plug it right in there. So the director's sort of looking over their shoulder, like, oh, okay, it sounds good. There's a control element there, which can either work to your advantage or against you. But yes, the editor is a great source.
Is it okay to interrupt with?
Yes, I was just thinking maybe more questions.
That's great, yeah.
But I was just thinking, I mean, because obviously editors work with mask music,
Yes, exactly.
They'll put like music from wherever.
Yeah, we can talk all about that.
Yeah, and I'm just curious about entering such a environment where you're, I mean, as a film composer, where you sit down and you look at something where the editor has put out a lot of different kinds of music, obviously choosing from whatever is around, and then the director, I'm assuming, is sometimes getting used to that music because it's, as you say, it's a huge part of what is happening, and it fits, and the mask music fits, and then your job is to make something that's right. part Rihanna, part David Sylvian, part I don't know. How do you go about that?
I mean, I generally start. I don't mess around, and I usually go if they're absolutely. We call it temp love. Temp means temp music, temporary music. So, and it's only natural that if you're sitting in a room for 10 hours a day for weeks watching the same thing over and over again, it gets into your. Even if you're not aware that there's music there, if you take it away, it's going to be really disturbing. So of course, when you try to change it, it's very difficult sometimes for the director and the editor and everybody else. So I never mess around, and if it's a piece of music that they are really into, I'm like, great, and then I just copy the BPM exactly. I see where it's hitting, and I see what they're trying to do with it, and then I just create a piece of music that calls up what I think the quality of that music is that they like, but I'll hopefully then can be incorporated in a larger scheme of things that can be artistically sort of satisfying as well. That's asking a lot of life, but yeah, that's.
So you like actually doing something that's very close to what was there already.
I mean, it winds up being completely different. But if you start in tempo, at least for me, because as you know,
that's a good start to catch the tempo. Yeah.
And as you know, editors, even if they're not editing the music, they have a tempo in their brain, so it's quite cool because you can, once you sort of figure out, okay, this is a 85 BPM kind of person, you can line up stuff with that, and it's
I mean that when you should start to work with a new film, they have this temp music, and in some of the important places this thing temp love is existing very often. And so if that is, for instance, 3 places in the film, perhaps, as you say, one try to get pretty close, but then I mean, there is a lot of other cues also. So I think that's interesting, because if you give them the candy they want, you can work a lot with the other places, and I mean, sooner or later you have to think about the whole soundtrack. It can't be like I mean nutida konstmusik i början och sen sometimes it can, but in a lot of films you must have the music should have a voice. It should be one voice, I think. Not always, but sometimes.
Right. So if you just sort of structure something that makes sense to them and makes them feel comfortable enough, you can, even if you haven't come up with that particular voice yet, once you do come up with it, you can go back then and reapply it to the cue that you had sort of made them comfortable with. But I go straight for I'm working on something now where it's like they're just had something right up front where it's just like, oh man, that is just not, it just, wow, so I went straight for that cue, and I've been just hammering at it, and I'm on like a 4th draft, but I'm gonna keep hammering at it. But I'm using very much the same, it's exactly the same BPM, the components are quite the same. And then I'm gonna come back later and dump something else on top of it that I've learned about in working through the rest of it.
Could I also do check in with the editor and director from, like, I'm now doing this, and what do you think of this, or how much do you allow the editor or director to change what you're doing? Is this an ongoing, are they in the process?
Yeah,
very much.
But I mean, it depends on the,
Absolutely. I think you have worked with Jesper Osmond. An editor. He cuts in the music, not always so very. I mean, they are editors, and we should fix the thing they do later. But they experiment with the music and do cuts, and I want this part here and this part here, and then they do a crossfade. But I mean, that's okay. That they are, and they want to show how they want it to be, and you have to do something about it.
So what is your freedom? Can you choose any instruments? Like if they have an idea, do you say, I want this, I want strings, I want this, I want voices, or how much do they?
I think it's very rare that a composer, unless it's particularly well versed in music, that a director will come and say, it should really be like a particular type of instrument. Let's say it should be woodwinds and and that and sort of ambient, sort of. So they'll speak more in terms of tonal and emotional language.
How you want to portray it.
I mean, you generally, I take my cue from the temp. Again, I think it's really smart to start there, because then you get people comfortable.
But sooner or later, if they don't say it, I'm not to say it rakt ut, so I mean, that's what you said also. After a while, you understand what kind of sound they like. Sometimes, I mean, perhaps because I have done a lot of things with strings and piano and with orchestra and stuff. So sometimes I'm chosen to do the music because they know I work with that stuff.
Right.
So that's in those cases that's what they want. But in other cases, I don't know. It's open, and there's but as we said, you understand after a while kind of sound they want to have.
But have you ever tried something totally different? Have you ever dared to go totally away from?
I don't waste my time with. I don't waste because I yes, absolutely, and I really fully 5-10 years into the career, I was still like just being like, but this is going to be great if you just will listen to and I've just never had any success with going in totally. I'm like, let's play this totally counterpoint. Let's make it like no music, nothing, and then that's worked a few times. The nothing has worked a few times, but then if it's sort of like. It'll be choral music, and then they've got some sort of, like Afrobeat thing going, and you're trying to flip. It's just that you just
right.
That's just me being maybe not being brave, but I also don't want to. I need to keep it moving.
Sure. Yeah.
Some other we have.
Yeah.
Do you always have the temp music or what do you call it?
Temp music. Temp music.
Is it always like that, or do you start with?
You mean if there sometimes are no music or?
Yes.
Yeah, I have had that situation, and that's nice but scary because you realize that perhaps this is gonna be a long walk before you really understand what they want.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
It's very seldom. I think. Yeah.
Who's first?
I just wonder how much you are also the producer and the sound technician in your daily work. I mean, I guess it's depending on the budget of the film, and if you do Black Panther, you have maybe more resources than if you do a small Swedish movie. But in general, like, how much are you also the producer and the one recording and mixing and mastering and everything?
Personally, I do all that stuff and try to. I really like it, and I really enjoy the technical aspects of it, and I think that's also part of the. I do a lot of sound processing and things like this. Sometimes outside of the box, as they say, with analog synths and analog tape delays and all this kind of stuff. So and then loop it back in. So this is all very important to me. But on the other hand, if I need to be the person who's, if it's an orchestral score, I don't know how to record in an orchestra. So then obviously you're in a fancy studio and you're just kind of sitting there like, that sounds good, I don't know, and I can't read music either. So that's another big sort of dirty secret, at least in my generation of the American composers. A lot of folks come from bands and they can't, Danny Elfman, they can't read music. So you have an orchestrator. And then that's a whole nother, very, very prestigious career path in Los Angeles, should you decide to do that. And I just sort of write and make samples and then hand it off to my German friend in New York, and then he goes, oh, this is crap or whatever, but then kind of fixes it up. And you can't have to be able to do that, just kind of.
So then you work together with somebody else.
In those instances, where it needs to be where it's very specifically, or if it's a large scale thing that I just can't technically do myself.
Yeah, I'm not that much a sound engineer, and when there is perhaps not that very much money in the project, I can koka soppa på en spik and do stuff for myself. But I'm more and again mostly I get jobs from what I've done earlier, and that is, it can be like 4 strings and a piano and perhaps some electronical stuff that I have made, but that is but the main thing, the main part of the music is recorded in a studio, because I should get so extremely nervous if I should record strings and stuff and have. I don't. I don't do that.
Yeah.
So it's depending on the music you compose, basically.
Yeah,
Like if you compose like you, or if you compose like you.
Yeah.
Or the job. Well, no, actually, it's more depending on the instrumentation and the size of things. You know, for instance, I'm able to record. Yesterday, I recorded a quartet at my studio, and that was no problem because I can just sort of stick up 4 mics and have 4, and I know it's going to work, and that's fine. Later on down the line, I'm gonna, it needs to be sort of fixed up, and that's also, I like to do that sort of detail work as well. But if it's much bigger than that, I don't want to. Also, you're trying to listen to it, and if you're listening to it and then you're trying to adjust the microphone, it can be a lot for your brain. But I think it's quite important, at least for me, to be in there with the sounds. I don't know, that's. Having said that, I honestly think you could sit on a plane and make a fantastic score using your phone, Absolutely. It's great. And why not? And also, sometimes, it should be your phone, it shouldn't be anything else. That's exactly the right thing, So there's so much fantastic technology that's easy to use, and it's not like the old days where, even when I started, where you really had to know how to run, how to get in there with compressors and all this stuff. You can just slap a plug in on it, and honestly, I'm not shy about that personally. Just if it works,
There is hjälpmedel.
Yeah.
Can we move on?
Jag är bara nyfiken på, det lät som ni tillbringade mycket tid tillsammans med klipparen, så tänkte jag, hur stor del av den totala arbetstiden på ett uppdrag kan man sitta och utbyta idéer och tankar och styra en klippare? Är det liksom 5% av tiden, eller är det mycket mer?
In the beginning and in later on in the process, the director used to be very interested in the music when he feels comfortable with other things like the editing, but I mean the music is a part of the editing, I think, but when he feel now I'm quite satisfied with the editing and stuff, then he starts to or she or he starts to get interested of the music.
That can take time.
It can take time. It's not always like that, but I don't know if you
absolutely no, and there's a certain period where before the picture is locked, as they say, where you've cut it's like we're done with the editing. The director's always going to be sitting there. So you're presenting music and you're sitting in the editing room, and then you'll see the directors be like, stop. Can we make sure can you make a note to, like, we're going to cut 5 frames off of that part? So that they're focused still on the picture, as they should be, which is great. But you're trying to present music, so it's sort of like, okay, but and I'm used. That's no problem. I'm not offended by that. Of course, I wouldn't be offended by that.
They have so lot to think about.
Yes, I would never want to direct a movie. I think I would rather pull out my fingernails.
I think it's natural because in Sweden, anyhow, they have to deal about money sometimes.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like,
and it's so many things they have to think about. So if they should really get involved in the music or already from the beginning,
you have to, I think on that note, you really have to remember that you're meeting these people in perhaps the most stressful situation in their lives. Maybe not. Maybe they're very seasoned and they're just sort of moving through their process, and they're going to move on to bigger and better jobs, and they're coming from bigger and better jobs. But frequently you've got a director who is, for the first time, she's responsible for a $30 million movie, and and the amount of pressure I can't even conceive of, and you've got these producers who constantly. That's the other thing, is that you can go down the road a long way with the director and the editor and have your little world and be like, this is so great. And then suddenly here come the money people and they're like, what is this garbage? What is this crap? What is this trash? What is this garbage, this, you know, dumpster fire that you're trying to present to me with my fucking $30 million? So then you realize, okay, shit, I better start paying attention to this person with the money, because they're going to ultimately, you can fight that, but you'll get fired. So if you want to get fired, that's, you know, so it's sort of, it's a little bit, and on, you know, on any budgetary level, it's a very stressful process for the director.
Yeah, and I that thing has been. I mean, this test audience, test, because it can be very stressful for everyone who works with the film. Because their opinion matters.
Yes. Well, for those who don't know, and this is especially, my reference is, sorry that my reference is the American market, but they do, especially in Hollywood, they do these ridiculous, you know, they'll take a mall in like a suburb of Los Angeles and they'll screen the film in front of another film that's completely unrelated to a just random group of people, and then they say, okay, and they pass out a form, and you have to fill out, what did you think of the movie? Did you like the character A? Did you like the character B? Did you find it boring? What parts did you find it boring? Did you like the music?
Yes.
You know, did you so then you get these random, you know, teenagers from you know, Pasadena who are like talking to you about what you're supposed to, and then, you know, these directors and the producers get this stack of information back, and then they're supposed to process it somehow, and somehow that's supposed to, this focus group is supposed to result in a better film. And sometimes I think it does, because the people are like, it's too fucking long. It's too long. And so that's generally one of the problems with directors, you know, that it's just too long. It's like, you don't need to say the same thing 40 times. So, yeah.
We're now, like, there's someone working through this movie where it's starting to get finished. Can we start from the beginning? Like when you get an assignment, and you say, yeah, sure, I will do music for this movie. So what do they send to you? And how do you start? As really on details, do you sit down and say, oh my God, what am I going to do? How do you do it? And what happens? And how long does it take before you can even present anything? And just in detail, what does it look like at your studio or your home or wherever you work when you get the assignment?
Well, I mean, I have sitting on my laptop, I can show you examples if you want to see this, but I'm just, you know, in the beginning stages of working on a TV series, and, you know, you get the shooting scripts, and they're still in the process of shooting the films.
Do you get like screens? You get descriptions?
Well, they haven't shot it, so you're sort of, the way that they do these, especially for Netflix and HBO and then Showtime and Hulu and everything else, they tend to do 10 episodes, and they tend to shoot them all at once for money, you know. But once you get the big machine up and push it off the cliff, you know, then it's moving, and so you might as well utilize it and shoot 10 episodes as opposed to just one. It'll cost the same amount of money basically to get the group. Anyway, they have a staggered sort of schedule. You get a schedule, and you sort of get if there's something that's edited and shot, you get that. A QuickTime movie.
Sit like with a screen, like an already shot movie, and say, here, I can put that music, and this is so long, and this is...
In this particular case, and it's different with everything, I've got the first episode, the pilot, as they say, and then there's 9 more that are coming that are being shot. Just a few weeks ago, I was on the set because there was some live music that had to be performed, so I had to sort of coordinate that, which is another thing that is sort of a thing that I do in addition to... So where do you start?
Do you start with a keyboard, or how do you start?
I mean, it really depends. Do you want to address your experience with the... Yeah.
To start with, you get some kind of, for me, I get some kind of panic. Or I get the feeling that, I know exactly what I should do. And right. When I get that feeling very early, very often it ends with that no, this was absolutely not what I thought about. No.
Right.
Not possible. And then I get panicked anyhow. So then I have to. And for me, it's a feeling that I'm searching for a key to look up a door. The feeling is always the same, that I'm looking for the key, because when after that I have had this kind of panic for a while, and I get a special feeling that this was probably the key. Then it's very often is the key.
Yes.
And there is perhaps easier to find the 3 or 5 other keys.
Right.
That's my feeling.
That's absolutely always the experience. It's so interesting, because there's this really tense period where you're just starting on the job, and maybe you don't know, even if you know the people very well, and you start sending things, and then they start responding, and then that process is can be very tense and can be very sort of loaded, and they're like, yeah, we'll know it when we hear it, and then you're like, but I can't, we gotta go, like, that doesn't tell me anything, like, what sucks about what I sent you, what don't you like about it? So you have to figure out how to communicate, and you go back and forth, but then and then when you hit on the key thing, it's quite magical, because then you can just sort of pull the sweater apart, as it were, or knit the sweater. What's the good analogy? It should be knitting a sweater. I feel that like
Can
you got
you
that.
describe one of those keys?
Yeah, exactly the same question.
Yeah.
Sure.
It sounds so poetic. We want what is a key?
Also,
Yes.
You mean more handfast?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can it be?
Do you choose like an instrument instead of
Yeah,
key?
it could be.
Yeah.
It could be like only 4 bars.
Yes.
Very short, or 8 bars. Anyhow, some kind of a small embryo. Is it called embryo? And perhaps it's only a few instruments, but you can hear the idea.
Right.
And I mean,
how many embryos before you say this is it? I mean, do you make a lot of them and try?
Yeah. For myself, I do a lot of embryos, and when I go to bed in the evening, I think perhaps this is the key. But the next morning, I realize at once that this was not the key, because I don't even want to send it, because it and it goes like this for a while, and then you feel that is the key, and it could be it's not like a 3 minutes long piece, or you do man gör så gott man kan och känner att perhaps this is the key, and if it is the key, it is the key.
Yeah. No, but the director will respond and say, that sound, that's a great sound, that's a really cool sound, that's beautiful, that's my movie or whatever, and those are beautiful moments.
Because it could be different.
If and when that happens.
So
it could be just like
sound, it could be
it's
a
usually
riff,
like a
or
fucking cello, because everybody
Yeah.
loves cello. So like, it's usually a cello, and you're like, it's a cello. It sounds really good, always sounds good.
And then you gotta use
And then
the
they're
cello.
like, great, that's it.
It doesn't need to be much.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of like a tone and then a cello, and they're usually quite happy with that. But
then you work from that cello, then, so you stick on that.
you
that
leave it
note.
you leave it right there.
You leave it right there. Yeah.
Exactly what they heard. Oh yeah, you don't move it. Why would you move it?
That's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, but that is something you can hear.
Yeah.
The key, you can hear the key.
Yes.
I mean,
Me.
it sounds audible.
Yeah. For me, I often get those ideas when I walk the dog, or when I wake up at 4 in the morning, and I feel no, it's not a good idea. But after a while, I realize perhaps it is a good idea, and I must write it down or sing into my phone or something, do something, so I don't forget it until the morning. So it's something, and of course that is a process of that you are thinking day and night about this problem, and then the brain starts to think a lot.
We talked,
Yes.
since I also work for local theatre, that when I work together with another composer, we have this night when we produce a lot of stuff. And then we wake up and say, oh, that's so crap.
Yeah.
There's so much shit.
Right.
And we said, we have some kind of expression where we talked like, you need to produce shit and clean it up.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of, you have a clean slate, and then things are actually visible.
I would say, or you at least need to show up every day and sit. There was I'm gonna misquote this person, so I don't remember their name, but it was a very famous Russian piano teacher who said that if you came and you sat at the piano and it was a blank piece of paper and you just stared at it, you were just like, nothing coming to me. You were still doing the work that you needed to do to carve away. We all know this, I think, who've gone through the creative process. You just it's necessary to go through those periods. It's the same, I think, it's the same process that you're describing, whether you're just stuck or whether you can just vomit a bunch of stuff out there and then kind of clear out what you don't need.
But I'm just curious about when, as you're speaking of the first thing, but I'm thinking like a movie is, music-wise, it can be so many things. I mean, you have like a theme maybe, and you have something that works in some areas, but when you start out, I mean, what do you always start out with, like the theme for the film, or just an ambient under? Do you see what I mean? What kind of part of the movie are you starting with? Because it can be so much, right?
For me, I always start with a sequence in the film that I think is very interesting to work with, and that I have a feeling that perhaps I have an idea about this. Because so I want to start with a place where I really get the feeling. It should be something I get the feeling about what it should be, and for me it's natural to start with that, and when I have found that key, it's easier, because then I mean, it's often not more than 5 different themes, and you make variations and stuff, but I think they should be related also. So when you get the first key, it should be a cousin to and so on.
Absolutely.
Do you have the first?
But you also, do you want to answer this question?
Yes, in terms of what do I start? I mean, can you restate it? Sorry. So
I was just trying to get my head around, because film music obviously can be so much. I mean, it can be like just a drone in the background, or it could be like a thematic thing. So would that vary, or what?
I go more for, because I think people respond to this more. I think people want, especially younger directors, they want to hear texture, more than, and they like sort of this, a little bit of neutrality, and then you can kind of sneak the melody in. I found that to be true, especially in indie film, and now translating to these series like True Detective or something like that, where it's basically tonal and it's textural. So I would tend to start with that, and I would tend to start at the beginning, because usually they've spent a little bit of time to make the beginning pop a little bit. They've got a piece of music in there generally. And if you can decode the beginning or some central point in the middle, as you were describing, I was picturing when you were talking, I was picturing a great scene in the middle of the film, and then if you there's always these sort of anchors that weigh things, maybe 4 or 5 points. And I always do these sessions where I record every sort of conceivable instrument that I can imagine doing this sort of melody or texture, and then do a version in a minor key, do a slower version, do a different, and then kind of sprinkle it through the film. That's really what so I wind up with sort of 2 themes. That's usually my max.
But
2 or
perhaps
3 themes.
It feels like more than.
Absolutely. Because you abstract, you sort of take the tonal base of something else and you put it in another context, and it does something else.
Martin. So who's first?
I don't know.
Shall we do one, Martin?
Yeah, but I think maybe you answered my question. I was like the key can be like a lead motif.
Yeah.
Then, or like, or it's something else.
Yeah. My experience is that there are seldom, for me anyhow, lead motif, but after you are finished, perhaps one motive feels more important than the others, but they are related, and so again, when I get the feeling that this is the key, det finns ingredienser i det som jag kan använda på de andra ställena. Så allting hänger ihop, och, not always, but as you said also, it should hänga ihop.
Yeah.
Because it should be a part of the film's DNA or identity. So.
Yeah, I wonder, you said to show up is very important, so I just wonder, like, how does your daily routines look like, and how does it change in the process of making the film? Like, okay, in the beginning of the film your days look like this, like you wake up and then you do this and then you do that. Do you have like a daily schedule or like a plan for your days?
Just like a job, you know, you try, I mean, for me it's like 7:45 to, because I have a kid and he needs to go to school, and then till, if I'm in Sweden, till about 4, because I got to pick him up at school usually, or if I'm in New York, till about 6, but I wouldn't work more than that.
Yeah, but what do you do during that time? Like, you wake up and you...
I bang away at it, and then if something doesn't seem like it's working, I move to another area in the film and kind of bang away at that, and then if that doesn't seem to be working, I just sort of play around with different sounds out of context of the film.
So you just sit and you watch the film and you sit with your music and you create, and then...
I mean, I don't know how else to... Yeah, that's...
And when you're tired, you take a break and...
Yeah, I don't think there's, I think that the breaks are important too, because obviously when you know, it's like when you forget someone's name, and then when you stop trying to remember their name, the name pops right into your head. So that's, I think, the breaks are quite important as well. But I don't like go for like a long walk, or I just sort of stay near my studio and kind of might do something else that's more cleaning up things or whatever, you know, but always returning to the work, which is to me just sitting there and making sure I'm available. And the, you know, yeah, right.
No, I didn't mind. I wanted Magnus.
It's quite the same. Perhaps it's different in the beginning than in the, because before I find the keys, I can't work more than perhaps 4 hours, because I get so and I think it's 4, 5 or 6 hours per day, but
I think
very concentrated. But when I feel, and the editor and the director thinks that, okay, we have the keys now, so then you can work a lot more, because then it's like develop this stuff, and that's then it's another part of the work. It's hantverks relaterat, and that's not easy, but it's easier to work more, and it's often mera bråttom than in the end. It's a lack of time often.
No, in the end you wind up just with, like any job, you sort of wind up with a checklist. At this point you gotta adjust this, and this has got to be this, you know, and then we got to hit her movement or whatever, and you know and so you just wind up with, and then you just go down the list. So it becomes sort of like any other clerical work, you know. You're sort of just moving around files and, you know, making things. You like, give her an emotional moment, and okay, and then you sort of raise the strings that are already there, but they just can't seem to hear. Anyway, yeah.
Okay. When you say making something that fits to a movement, that makes me think about how much of a detail do you work? Is it like they get something that the editor puts in place, or do you get asked to hit specific time frames or whatever? In how much of a detail do you work? Do you see what I mean? Do you
Yes.
Mostly there is a temp music on the place, and we have talked about that now. So it's impossible to not think about that.
Yeah.
And as you say, often you try to pick stuff from that and pick the tempo and what was your
I guess
question?
I think my question is, where does the film composer start and the sound designer end, or how much do it weigh into, do you sit with the film in front of you and compose and get asked to cue your music very tight to the picture, to the, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Or do you just hand over, this is my piece of music, you can put it in place like you want it to? Or
okay, it depends on the film a little. But
yes, it does. I would say it really depends on the director and the editor and their style of. Because I've got I have sitting on my in my email in my inbox is like this email that is just so long, and it's notes on like stuff that just it's like at this point in this many frames, she shifts her eyes, so you have to do. I mean, it's just like exhausting. So you kind of go through and you do your best, but then ultimately you have to just be like, what, I can't. It is what it is, and then once they mix it, they realize like, oh, you can't. What's more important is the ambient sound and getting the ADR, which is the additional dialogue recording that you do, and all the sound design and all that kind of stuff gets exciting, and so they get excited about that. So these details that you do, eventually they don't really matter. I mean, of course they matter if they're significant, but it can be very, it can be like, hey, that piece of music is great. We're just gonna slap it in here and kind of edit the piece. In fact, we'll make a whole. This happened to me like twice. I can't say that it happens all the time, but we're gonna make like a suite out of it. And why don't you just extend it? Super cool. So then you get to that. Never happens. I'm sorry, I shouldn't even mention that. Yeah.
So they have brought some examples with them that we can listen to. Is that in, or what do you think you should?
I mean, I don't know. Is that interesting?
Yeah, is that interesting?
Don't you want to? I want to listen.
I want to listen too.
But you had some kind of sequence from a development, or
because we talked about when you should write music for a certain sequence, and there is this mask temp music. How did that sound, and how did it sound when it was?
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And you had some very interesting. There, I mean, you had 8.
I don't know
the
if
whole
it's
way. Yeah.
Well, let me get up there. And,
who's plugged in there, Marcus?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe it's you.
No, it's Nathan.
Doesn't matter, Nathan. Okay.
But so.
Is it no? It's not. It's just sound, or is it? No.
No, it's a quick time video. So I mean, yes. So I'm going to show you the same sequence, which basically nothing's happening. She's arriving. Turn it up.
Underneath the suits, behind closed doors, we're all with the same desires. And those desires can be raw and dark and deeply shameful. Looking back, it wasn't that I was unaware. It was that it was too thrilling, too intoxicating. I couldn't stop. And suddenly I was so deep in the woods, I didn't recognize anything. Especially myself.
Right? So
cello.
Yeah, exactly. People like cellos. So let me see. Here's the same thing, version 3.
Just
So I had figured out the cello part, but then beyond that, I wasn't sure what they were not responding to. And they changed the cut. They were like, make it more suspenseful. I'm like, okay, what's suspenseful about a pan shot at Grand Central? I don't know. But they felt very strongly about that cut, that I hit it. So I hit it. I don't know why. Right. So there's yet another version. Let me see. What's this? Yeah. Okay. Same thing. This was my first attempt because they had something really minimal in there. And they wanted to be like, we want to like her. We want to like her more. And I was like, oh, okay.
Thank you.
Let's make her feel sort of more warm. You know? Like warm and crazy. So yeah. So from the beginning, I should have had the key because the key was the cello, and that wound up being the key. But the thing was, this project was so screwed up that it didn't really matter that I had the key, and it just wound up being sort of one thing after another. Anyway, that's just it's not the best example, but it shows you how things sort of develop over time.
So which one was it number 8 that turned into?
Oh, I don't have it on here.
Oh, you
It was
don't have
number
it,
like
okay.
14 or 15.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what, and you know what? I never even saw the final version. You can watch it on Netflix.
Netflix.
It's not a great show. I'll be honest about that.
Okay.
And that was the problem too, is that nobody was communicating. You had these producers who weren't talking to each other and had factions. So it was sort of like the producers had their people and they were into what their people were doing, and then the other producer set had their people and were into their people. And I was sort of like on one side of the fence, having been brought in by another producer, and the other producers hated me. And they thought like, why is this? It's just a bunch of like it's it's nothing, you know. But they had hired me based on they temped the entire first thing with only my music, and it was a very kind of score. So I was like, well, okay, you like that? And they're like, it's great. So then I went with the rain, and then they suddenly that was not. So you never know. But then I had to figure out how to. And it's these two sets of producers, and one's fighting, and she's then it turns out that she used to be sleeping with this other producer. You know, you just don't. People are people. You know, it's a human enterprise, and it's a huge group effort. Always making a film. Ultimately, we see it alone, I think, a lot. But ultimately, it's just a tremendous number of people who come together to make it work.
Yeah, you realize that on the premiere when you meet them.
Yeah, you're like, oh, you were, yeah, okay, yeah.
So do you have an example?
Yeah, I have some.
And then is this turned down?
Dubbelklicka får vi se vad som händer. Jag tror det. Jag kan ju säga först att det här är alltså en dokumentär om framförallt om honom där som heter Slavik, och han är professionell liksom tävlingsdansare, åker jorden runt och för han är i 40-årsåldern nu, 45 kanske till och med, kroppen börjar liksom inte, det finns en gräns för hur länge man klarar av sådana där grejer. Och han har ganska stora problem med sig själv, för han har jättesvårt att ha roligt och slappna av och ta saker och ting lite mer lättvindigt, och han har jättesvårt för förhållanden. Han är så fruktansvärt seriös. Och nu så ska han göra comeback med en tjej som han har träffat, och de är tillsammans. Och problemet är att hans gamla fru som ju är i samma ålder som han, hon vinner alla tävlingar tillsammans med en annan partner, och det är alltid samma grej. Och det här är liksom som VM. De ska vara med nu, Blackpool Championships, och det var så här det såg ut när jag fick filmen då, med maskmusik av Philip Glass. Det är ju lite jobbigt.
Alltså nu får vi höra maskmusiken.
Ja, precis.
Okay.
Philip Glass works really well.
Han är väldigt noga med sitt utseende.
Welcome to Blackpool Championships. This is the most prestigious tournament in Latin dance. Tonight, we'll determine who's the best couple in the world of today.
How do you feel yourself extra? I had a question. Stand out. Like wine. I don't think.
Det var gamla frugan som vann igen helt enkelt.
Beautiful.
Så här blev det sen då. Och jag kör den och pratar under tiden eller efteråt.
Så nu är det din egen musik.
Dance Festival, the most prestigious dance competition in the world. Here we will determine who is the best couple in the world today.
How do you feel yourself is going? I had a question. If we sit down, I don't think enough.
Fifth place, couple 31, Slavic Trinity and Anna Melikova. British Latin American champions and still champions, Michael Molotowski and Joanna Nunes from Poland. This year, ladies and gentlemen, for the champion.
Just det. Så han skadat knät. Det var den belöningen han fick. Så det, han har lite jobbigt hela filmen igenom faktiskt.
Where can you see the film?
No, not. Yeah, probably you can find it on some, like iTunes or what, perhaps, but it was. It's kind of 7 or 8 years old. 5-7 years old.
Sändes den på SVT?
Ja, det gjorde den. Den är dansk.
Ja, jag har sett den.
Okej, du har sett den. Ja. Ja, i alla fall. Ska vi se här. Här är... Here's another documentary. It's... a band called Beirut.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
They're fantastic.
Yeah, they were very fond of one album, so I play with them. Yeah, so I play first the music that was on a lot of places in the film. This one. So this was the tent music.
If I was young, I'd flee this town. I buried my dreams underground. As did I. We drink to die. We drink tonight. Far from home, a lesson comes as take them down. One by one, we'll bring it down. It's not been found. It's not around.
It's very long, but I like it very much. So it was how should I? Hur ska jag liksom fixa det här? Tänkte jag. Men i alla fall, ja, det blev så här. Sen there was a strange situation, kind of temp love, because I worked a lot with the a place where this music should be, and you know, I recorded the music in the Tambourine Studios with drums and ukulele and guitar and everything and dragspel och sådär. But when the sound designer heard this, he said, "No, your din skiss är bättre." With sampled instruments and like only I play trumpet, and it was only the trumpet who was real.
Yeah.
So what you're going to see now is the final result, and they go so the first part of this place, there is my skiss music, because they liked it more to that part, but then they go into a tunnel, and then the real thing comes. I wasn't so satisfied with that med den lösningen, but it ended up that way. Quite. It's a film about those two people that are de ingår ett arrangerat äktenskap. Det utspelar sig i Kirgizistan, where people do like this. They ingår arrangerade äktenskap ofta, och they are very poor people. It was a film about being poor in Kirgizistan, and för med sig, kan man säga. Yeah.
Пожалуйста, на скорой поезд 15 Москва. Состав поезда находится на первом пути. Номера вагонов начинаются с главного состава.
Yeah. I mean, it felt very strange that ending up in half the tune was digital, at least a lot of the...
Ja, väldigt god stämning in.
Ja. Jag tänkte faktiskt spela intro till filmen också, för att det var helt fel. Because in a way everything started with that elephant gun. We have this elephant gun. You must get very inspired of Beirut överhuvudtaget, but especially this elephant gun. And in a distant way, this the start of the film is also inspired by the elephant gun tune, which I like. I like it very much. This Beirut, I like Beirut very much. Ja, så här ser det ut överallt.
O'zi ishdan kech kelib bu qilib senga qistob deydi. Bayam yur ko'rchi, yana yo'qsa uchrashuv chiqasan. Qizni ko'rib ay ko'rganingiz yana hayajon bosadi-da, o'zi hayajon bosib nima bo'ladi? Yaxshi chiqib aylanib uchrashuvda bildim atini Dildorani. Hattoki qo'ldan ham shu. Men u qizni o'pmaganman, hattoki qo'ldan ham ushlamaganman. U bilan bo'lish, faqat u bilan yaxshi hayot kechirish. Endi aşk qizni olib qoladigan bo'lsam, unda hayot boshqacha bo'ladi.
oxiratlarni obod bo'lishligini o'zini nasib etadi.
Qo'shganlar qo'shatarsiz. Shu yerda aziz bo'lsin. Tahlil tolini tasdiqlaysiz. O'zlaridan ko'rishsin.
Yeah, and att den heter Long Distance Love is that he has to go to Moscow to work. That they travel for 1 week or 10 days or something, so he's very far. And while he's in Moscow, his first child is born. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Vad var nyckeln här då?
Ja, det var väl i den där som jag tyckte, ja då med de här digitala instrumenten. Det var faktiskt till och med jag som spelade ukulelen där. Och det var väl den liksom, att jag tyckte ändå att ja, men jag gjorde den och sen så började jag göra jag hittade en ackordprogression som jag tyckte om för att den skulle ju vara liksom lite enkel men ändå ha en twist, och sen så började jag göra en massa trumpet ovanpå det. Det är liksom fyrstämmig trumpet ibland och sådär. Ja. Lite så.
Yeah, nice. I have a question about this when working with on the culture. Since I'm a folk musician, I get annoyed like when they do a movie or some kind of show about 1700s and they use Evert Taube. And it's like, come on, there's so much more.
I'm sorry.
Evert Taube, he's like a singer-songwriter from the 1900s. This traditional. I mean, it's the wrong century.
Right.
And here you have Kyrgyzstan, where they have probably amazing traditional music during the weddings. So how do you handle that when they say, "Oh, we want the Beirut"? Yeah, but this culture has amazing music you can pick things from. How do you work with that?
It's sometimes not emotionally correct it's a bit on the nose. I mean, sometimes it can be much more interesting to sort of mix, here's an opportunity to create a new sort of context. You're in this setting, and yes, it's a documentary, but here's an opportunity to create a world that is the film. So I think anything goes, really, you know. I did like a medieval, you know, Game of Thrones era thing, and I used like 808 like kick drums and, you know, sort of stuff you would hear in hip hop or and it was actually the right thing to do.
Yeah, in some cases, I guess you can always use.
Well, I think it's different when it's a famous music, like in Queen Elizabeth the movie, and in the end they use Mozart's Requiem, and it's like not the same century, but it's a very famous piece that everybody knows. This is Mozart's Requiem. Why are they using it in that time century where it's not? I mean, the same,
it's kind of
that's different than when you create something like if you compose music that sounds like Mozart's Requiem. That's another thing. Or like if you change, you can have elements from another time. But if it's like a famous, like Everto, I think that's a bigger problem. Like I still remember that when watching that movie, but like, why they use this music here?
Exactly.
This is not the right century.
And it's sort of like pissing on all the people that know so much about our historic music that no one gets to hear. And here's an opportunity, and they didn't.
It's very cheap to be like, I mean, you know, sometimes it's justified, but you know. If you have a Vivaldi thing that everyone knows and everyone has their own emotional relationship with, if you just kind of slap it in your movie, it's a little bit like, what, you know, what, do you want to create your own world or not? I mean, is it, here's your opportunity to do what it's, you know, it's create your own sort of universe. It's like David Lynch says, you know, when you enter a movie, you enter a world, and he's a great example of that in every element of what, you know, he does. Particularly music and the sound is entirely his own. So why wouldn't you take advantage of that medium for that? But I see what you mean, absolutely. And I think it can be really annoying with those.
Well, do you ever go look for like inspiration when you know that this is a culture that might have something?
I did a film called Tigerland, which was set in Vietnam, and it was like it was a Hollywood thing. But I wound up using. The director was like, let's make it Asian.
Okay.
So then that felt really racist and weird. So I was sort of like, well, okay, but you know, let's combine it with sort of combine it with like a distorted harmonica. But then I found this guy was in the subway playing this beautiful Chinese instrument called the erhu, which is a Chinese violin. And if you've heard it, you know what it sounds like. It's gorgeous. So I went and found him and worked with him, and we sort of. The entire score was sort of a timpani drum, him, and then this distorted harmonica, which is sort of supposed to represent the South, where these guys were from, you know, in this film. So that was quite.
So you find your own sound in it.
But you get into some weird. I was working on a film called Dirty Pretty Things, which was set in London, and the primary character was an African man, and they were like, "Why don't you have some?" There's a scene where he's running down the street. Where's some African drumming? It was just like, why? Because I mean, it could have been a cool idea had there been some sort of relevance to the rest of the score, but they were like, it's him and he's running, and but it was clearly based on their reaction to different sets of information than just the film itself. So I pushed back against that.
Yeah, and I just want to recommend to listen to the radio program about Ludwig Göransson and when he did the Black Panther movie. Because he was using a lot of Senegalese musicians, and I think his way of doing that was quite nice, and also always credited them. Like when he got the Grammy and stuff, he was giving credit to the musicians that he was working with in Senegal, and it's like he used the African theme, and he also credited the people who participated. So it's a 1 hour documentary you can listen. And he I think he found a quite good way to deal with that, to incorporate the traditional elements of the context and still do his own thing, and
so
still
that's sort of like you have to weigh
a bad balance, exactly. Because like you said, it can easily be done in the wrong way as well.
And this is what I say, when if you get into the folk music and you have sort of let's say you have pick your sort of racial or whatever. If you then slap exactly the piece of folk music that this person's ethnicity would be associated with on top of their scene, just for the sake of it, you can run into problems. I think. think that score is insane. It's amazing, and it's complete noise. It's just absolute it's just nuts. But you get the sense that you're in this palace, and it's crazy like the palace is, and the sounds sound like they could be coming from that time period, which is like deconstructing the. Yeah.
I have to stand up now. We're getting close to the. I mean, we could go on all night. Just amazing to dig down into this and discuss. Can we get some lights? Just someone push the light button, or can you allow me? We're just some minutes to 8 that would put as the end time, and I would just give you like 10 or 5 minutes to talk to each other before we split up here. So I want to end now actually. Where's Magnus? You're over there. Get the guys on stage here. Kan du komma fram? So even if you have like 1,000 questions, so even if you have 1,000 questions, still you have to collect them, and we have to bring them back in that case.
Yeah.
So
I want to address something, which is that the market in Sweden is really, really different and special, and has a lot of unique challenges. So that if you're looking to get into the things here in Sweden, there are some very specific. Did you lose power there? There are some very specific issues that which we discussed. I don't know if that's interesting to people, but if I think that it's because it's not the case necessarily where I'm mostly working, but so
you can.
Well, I don't want to single out any particular. There's a new trend, and this is as you know, Spotify was created here, and all of these sort of services that are not necessarily favorable to the artist, and yet are worldwide and are sort of have this IKEA effect of sort of going everywhere in the world, and you can't avoid it, and everyone has to use it now. There's something called epidemic sound. Do people know what that is?
Yeah.
So epidemic sound was brought about by one of the people who used to work at STIM. Now STIM is the collection, as you know, the collection agency for. So this person knew the game and went and created this entity, and basically they get young composers, pay them 2,000 kroner per track, and then or less, and then they just shove these tracks into movies. There's certain music supervisor groups that are doing this very aggressively in Stockholm, and it's a very specific thing. So I just am pointing that out because it's a real issue. And of course, all of these companies, including SPT and including Seymour and including all the Netflix and HBO, they want to own. They used to just license stuff, which meant that a production would make a film independently, and then they would buy it for a period of time. But now they were like, why on earth would we want to do that? We have so much money, so we'll make our own. They want to own all the elements of the film forever. So it's sort of, that also means the music. So if you're signing a contract now, it used to be that I could retain my publishing. I can't do that anymore. They won't let you do that. You have to really fight back. On smaller films, maybe, but actually definitely on smaller films, but on larger productions, they just disallow you keeping your publishing. And now this is becoming more and more the case in Sweden with the advent of this sort of music supervision groups, frankly, like Music Super Circus and in Stockholm. I'm not trying to be depressing. I'm just trying to be real about what the situation is here. It's there's some challenges.
So how to avoid them? How are you avoiding them, Magnus?
I've never got the question like that. If this Spotify thing, but I could have. I don't know really, but eventually I have signed some contracts that I can't give ut musik and stuff like that. And actually one guy a company in Copenhagen. They wanted half of my stim.
Yes.
There is a name for that.
Yeah.
I don't can.
What they call it? They're a 360. I don't know what they call it here. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was tough like hell. So I was young and I wanted that job. We should record with symphony orchestra, and I thought it was. And yes, I got a good arvode, but it ended up he picked a small bit of my stim or stim royalties.
Right. And I mean that's the stim money and the BMI money, or it depends on where you are in the world, but these collection agencies, that's how you accrue a legacy for your family later on. That's how you make money. You get, and then they sort of present these deals where it's like, no, we've done a calculation, and over a period of 14 years, you would make perhaps $15,000 or whatever from BMI or worldwide or whatever. I don't know how they calculate it, and those are totally random numbers. And then so they pay you more up front, but it's actually, you're getting, over time, it's a bit of a, we call it a swizz, which is you think you're getting something, you actually, it's like sugar cereal, you're not really getting anything in your body.
Do you think one should stay away from that totally, or is there any good effects? Starting out as a film music composer, would anyone find you because you put up stuff on that epidemic sound stuff?
It's very useful for a young composer.
Yeah, I mean, if you know what you are doing, I think there's not much to say about that. That you get the sum of money, and they own that song for forever, and can use it how they want. If you are satisfied with that and know that for sure. So that's, that thing, det fanns inte when I was younger. So I haven't had these kind of opportunities. So I don't know if when I was 20, perhaps I just kanske skulle tänkt, okay, good thing to do, I don't know.
We can move away from that topic. I just thought it was important to bring up because it's very specific.
But how about outside of Sweden, you would say that this is different then?
No, I think it's a very American model that the Swedes have really taken to the next level, as is frequently the case with things like Spotify and Epidemic Sound and I mean, it's so aggressive. And that's I'm sound a little bit like the old man who stands by the train tracks and is like, "You're too loud" to the trains. It's like the trains are going to go anyway, So it's sort of like maybe it's time for me to move away and yet let the younger folk come in and do it, which is great, but with the understanding that the business model is very different.
And also the quality, I would say. My kids were watching this TV show from SVT, and it was, I listened to it, and like, what is this awful music? It's just a lot of treble, and it's like this, and my ears, and I think it was awful music. And in the after text, it was, Epidemic Sounds.
Yeah. Because it's a library, it's a music library, and then they actually have these things where they sign deals with production companies for 5 films. So you have to work with them and use their library for your 5 film. It's unheard of. I mean, it's new, and I'm sure it's the future because people are going to make a lot of money, but it won't be the composers. So that's just something to bear in mind. But that's a bummer. Let's not.
How do we end on a?
No, let's say the advice. If you want to go into this, what is your advice for somebody who wants to start new in this business?
Can you start?
Yeah, sure. I think you have to. There's nothing that replaces contact with people. And I'm not saying that you need to go to Stockholm and schmooze around, or need to go fly to Los Angeles and spend all your money to spend a week there, and because that would be sort of useless. But if you know that there's a targeted way, for example, film festivals, film schools. When I was younger, I put up a sign at NYU Film School that said, "I'll score your movie for $5." And I did. I scored this, it scored like 3 or 4 student films. And one of those people knew this director, Kim Pierce, who went on to do Boys Don't Cry. And that pretty much led directly. So, I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but there are so many opportunities. I mean, in this building, there's filmmakers wandering around. And I mean, you make yourself available in that way. And, putting yourself out there, I think is really important. But there's ways that, especially with social media now, it's much more complicated, and it's everybody's trying to be the loudest voice. But I think if you really target the places where people actually are, the conservatories and the film schools, and say, I'll do your movie for free. I'll do it, just as a test. Let's do it. Call me. I think that people will still take you up on that. I think that's a good way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree that this thing going to sammanhang where you meet people and try to get contact. Yeah. And I have been out 2 years for something that's called Nordic Film Music Days.
Yeah.
And it's arranged by ska and other deras motsvarighet in Norway and Denmark and Iceland and Finland. And they were talking a lot about that stuff, that go to festivals and arrangements where people who work with film are, and don't be afraid to talk to people. And one friend of mine, he said it was 15 years ago, but he was a director, and he said you can get 1,000 no's, but suddenly there is a yes.
Yeah, it's true.
That's a good end.
It just occurred to me that this week there's some sort of Nordic film thing in Copenhagen. There's some sort of party that they're doing, right? I was invited to something on Friday. I don't know what it is. I wasn't gonna go, but go see what it is. I don't know. Stand out. I'm serious. There's no reason to. It's a sort of a fool's errand to go to con and then like stand around like you're gonna. That's great. That's kind of just doesn't make any sense. But if you target places like the Ghent Film Festival in Belgium, world-class film festival. No, not a lot of people know about it. Go to Ghent. It's a beautiful city. Why not have a nice meal? It's give us your music. Give us your music. I mean, I always want to work with a kora player. Seriously. I mean, so
very close.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's one of the. I mean, I've developed relationships in these kind of settings too. This is what it's all about. Really.
I feel like I have to cut off now because you want to talk more. But a huge applause to these guys. So I can just say we're going to do more. I like this with having 2 people up here having double experience and double knowledge and wisdom. So we're going to do more of that, but totally different topics coming up after the summer. Yeah.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But honestly, give us, if you've got links and stuff, give SoundCloud stuff, give it to us.
Yeah.
Really.
Super.
Yeah. Thank you.
Nice.